My name is Rob Fisher, and I'm a faculty member here at the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School of Applied Social Sciences. And I want to welcome you to this installment of our Conversations in Philanthropy series. And this is an exciting session tonight because finally we're going to answer the question, how can all of us be philanthropists? And our focus tonight is on what's been called giving circles or forms of that type. And so I think it's a really exciting, and we'll have a nice intimate discussion with our guests on this wonderful topic. As you may know, philanthropy comes from the Greek love for humanity, phila and anthropos. And for us at the Mandel School, as a 100-year-old school of social work, celebrating our 100th year this year, it's very close to our heart because we work not only in financial philanthropy, often as recipients of funds, but we work very closely in enacting that money into action with individuals, families, and communities. So that form of love pervades kind of the discussion of philanthropy, and that's part of our aim with this series, is to raise discussion about all of our role in philanthropy. Even if we're not big donors, that we all play a role in a philanthropic spirit that is certainly alive and well in the Cleveland region. So as I mentioned, tonight we're going to turn to a discussion that we're calling Hands-On Philanthropy, and I couldn't have invited a better set of individuals to talk about that. I'm going to be introducing first Karen Pistone, who is with a group called Fund First Giving Circle. Judy Wright, who is representing the Cleveland Collectivo, and Hillary Sparks Roberts, who's the Executive Director of Social Venture Partners Cleveland. And if you didn't pick up, we have some one-pagers at the back, and that hopefully you got when you came in, that describe the three organizations and compares them on some various dimensions. So we're kind of representing a range of different forms of doing giving circle type work. Now, for context, I wanted to tell you that we all as donors can find great fulfillment in our philanthropic giving. And we can become, as individuals, involved in giving circle type efforts. And as a working definition, you can think of giving circles as individuals who come together and pool their financial resources and talent to make collective choices about how to allot that valuable resource. And these run the gamut from informal giving circles all the way up to formed 501c3 nonprofit organizations. And we have that range represented in our panel. What's interesting over the last 20 years or so is while many forms of collective work, if you think of Putnam's Bowling Alone, how as a society of joiners, we might have decreased in our willingness to commit to kind of informal action. Giving circles have run counter to that trend. They have exploded on the scene. The estimates now place numbers of giving circles in the U.S. Over 500, donating over 100 million in resources and engaging over 12,000 individuals in giving circles, and that was as of 2010. And continue to grow. And I think as you listen to our panelists tonight, you're going to understand why there's such an opportunity as individuals to become engaged in a very different way than simply getting out our checkbooks and writing that check to a familiar nonprofit. So I'm going to stop there with the introduction. What I'm asking my panel to do is to introduce themselves to you, talk a little bit about the entity that they're representing, and we are going to go from Karen to Judy to Hillary. And then after we kind of conclude those opening comments, I have a few questions that I'm going to ask them to dialogue on, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So thank you for being here. Oh, and I do want to say, don't leave early, because all that food that was covered up outside is going to be uncovered, and that's our nice reception for us to get asked those key questions that you might have that you're not going to ask here. So with that, I'm going to start and ask Karen to start us off.
Well, a bit of a history on Fund First, and we spell it F-U-N parentheses D, first, because our goal is to first of all have fun, doing what we all love to do, which is helping people that are in need. And Fund First was started in 2008. It was an extension from an investment club that was started by one of our founding members. I was not involved at that point. But they decided to collectively get together and contribute $1,000 apiece and start to donate this money at the end of the year to various organizations. We have between 25 and 30 members. We like to keep it at 30. We're a very informal group. It's all women. And we keep it as all women because a lot of the organizations that we're interested in are really supporting women and children's issues. My personal background is that I was in a previous giving circle called the Giving Back Gang, which was run by a wonderful guy named Hank Dow. And he had gotten me involved in that years ago. And for one reason or another, the dates that they got together were no longer convenient, and I met Sandra Kiley, and she got me introduced to Fund First, which is really just a great organization. We are an informal group. We meet 6 to 8 times a year, usually on a Wednesday evening. We do a potluck. We go to somebody's home. We all drink a little bit of wine, and we chat it up for about a half an hour, and then we get down to business. We have an advisory board that's made up of 3 people, and it rotates. So, for example, this year I am the senior person on the advisory board. This is my 3rd year, and we bring somebody new in every year to replace the person who is leaving. So my responsibilities are really to, once we pick a theme, is to start to find the speakers. We bring in one speaker initially that really has a pretty good overview of what the topic is about and who the organizations are that we should be speaking to. And then we go a little bit deeper and we start bringing in some other speakers that point us in the direction of the organizations, most of which are very small nonprofits, that would benefit from our donation, from our giving. This works really well because I find it a lot of fun. Because once we narrow down who the supporting organizations are that might be interested in receiving our money, we do site visits. And I think that this is like the most fun thing that we do, because we really go into these places and we do tours, we talk to the executive director, sometimes we see board members, usually 4 or 5 of us go, and we really get a feel of what that organization will do. Then after that, we ask them to submit a proposal for what they would do for our $25,000 to $30,000, and we get together in November and we vote on it. And the vote can get a little contentious, and I think you're going to ask us about that. We have, as I like to say, this is 25 very alpha women. And everybody, it's just such a great group of women because it ranges from people who have been involved in social work from the beginning of their career to some very, very wealthy individuals that have probably never worked outside of their home but have volunteered and been committed to the Social Justice Network Committee or community for years, for their whole lives. And then we have very high-powered executives that work with us. So it's just really a nice range of women, and they all have a lot to add to it. So that's my little preliminary.
That's a wonderful opening. Okay, so let's keep going.
Hi, I'm Judy Wright, and I'm one of the founding members of the Cleveland Collectivo. So the backstory of the Cleveland Collectivo is that there were about 12 years ago, a group of us who were friends who were feeling sort of frustrated after a disappointing election, and also simultaneously feeling a little powerless around our ability to do anything impactful with philanthropy. Most of us were in our late 20s, early 30s. Almost all of us worked in some form or another in the nonprofit sector and had been kind of participants in this hamster wheel of trying to get institutional funding, and really feeling both the drain on that, on feeling like you can make change, and the pressure around doing everything with a lot of rules and form, and the way that philanthropy often works in the institutional world, feeling sort of limited by that. And so we started talking about the idea of just kind of, how can we do this differently? How can we find a way to get resources to projects that are off the radar, that aren't going to get in the door at some of our big financial or big philanthropic institutions, but maybe just a little bit of money could start something new or something different, something with a little higher risk, or off the beaten track a little bit. And so we looked at different models of giving circles and sort of settled on the basic premise of, for us, we wanted as little structure and as little rules as we could do. We all sort of professionally spent a lot of time in strategic planning sessions and drawing up mission statements, and we wanted really as little as possible to do with that. So we created what is called the Cleveland Collectivo. The name is drawn from sort of the traditional immigrant practice of pooling money to create a new business or a new project to support within a community. And now we just celebrated our 10th anniversary last year. So over the course of 10 years, we're really excited to say we've donated cumulatively, we just passed the $100,000 mark. And what I think is really exciting about that is that what our membership is people who donate $400 a year. Usually people do either a monthly donation or $100 a quarter. So really that big pool of money is coming from lots of small actors. Some people donate more of that. But the group size has varied throughout the year. Sometimes I would say usually there's a core of about 20 to 30 people. And when we first started, we were trying to be very non-traditional. We kind of did the usual thing of have a written proposal and have people write up their idea for us and have monthly meetings. And we realized we were kind of recreating on a much smaller scale some of the things that annoyed us. And so we had a big turning point that became fewer meetings, more potlucks as our model, and switched to trying to really remove barriers for people trying to get support from the Collectivo. And so our grants range in size from $500 to $5,000, but usually average around $2,500. So we really, for that size grant, to make people jump through hoops, we felt like was unnecessary and not helpful for anyone. So we've gone through many iterations. We feel like we were on the early trend of the fast pitch idea, which we switched from having a written proposal to doing a fast pitch process to narrow it down to a small group of finalists. And we're now figuring out what's next for us, as we feel like the world of crowdfunding has changed so much, and there's so many different models of fast pitches, and there's all sorts of online crowdfunding to figure out what can we try out that's something different. We sort of pride ourselves on having no rules and changing how we operate regularly. So we're actually right now in the process of figuring out what we're going to do for our giving for 2016. But I think that's the backstory.
Okay. And just as somebody that studies nonprofit organizations, just to put a fine point on the distinction here. So the Fund First group, are you all totally informal? There's no, the actual logistics of the money. Is it individuals? You individually make the gifts, or does it go into one checking account? How is that handled?
We use the Cleveland Foundation's donor advised fund.
Okay.
So in the beginning of the year, we all write our checks to the Cleveland Foundation, and then at the end of the year, we tell them how to distribute the money. And it varies. We have, I think, the most, and Jan is here, one of our members, I think the most that we've ever split it up is 5 ways. So we gave everybody $5,000. Sometimes it's 2 different groups, sometimes it's 1. It really depends on every year, but it's always a lively discussion. But we work through the foundation. We used to do that. I think at the Giving Back gang, we used to write our own checks. Right. But for some reason, I don't know, that became cumbersome.
Okay, so that's my error. I thought
What do you
that
do?
was I thought you were using the Giving Back Gang kind of model. So it's actual donor advised fund at
Yeah,
the
well, they're
foundation.
using a donor advised fund now,
They
too.
move there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we have a.
Do you?
We have a fiscal agent that's International Partners in Mission, which is a local nonprofit that actually serve as a fiscal agent mostly for international projects, but we were really lucky that they accepted us as one of their projects. So we donate to IPM, which is a tax deductible donation. What's nice is about IPM is the way they're set up. They can distribute money to individuals, to businesses. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and that was really critical for us because we really wanted to be able to give money to people that couldn't get money in traditional channels. And when you look at the pool of people we've supported over the years, there's a blend of individuals, a couple of businesses, some established nonprofits, some startups. So that IPM has really made it possible for us to do the giving the way we want to do and still have it be tax deductible for people that care about that.
All right, we can come back to that because it might be a question from the audience as well. Now we'll go to Hillary at Social Venture Partners.
Sure. So I'm Hillary Sparks-Roberts, the Executive Director at SVP, for short, in Cleveland. We are an international network. So we're part of this greater network that is now in 40 cities and 9 countries. It started in Seattle back in the late 1990s. And then in SVP Cleveland, we started 15 years ago. So this is our 15th anniversary, started back in 2001. We have grown we currently have 80 individual partners and growing. I think what often surprises people is that the partners themselves range in age from 27 to 87 and everything in between. So it's a wonderful, wonderful, eclectic mix of folks from every imaginable professional background, doctors and lawyers, engineers, artists, entrepreneurs, you name it. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. What is also a little bit unusual about our model, some of our partners have referred to us as a giving circle on steroids, because we, yes, pool our funds, so every partner makes an annual contribution, but they do far more than that. So they, as partners, also can give of their time and their expertise, because what we do is we pick one nonprofit every year to give an allotment of money. In our case, it's $15,000 a year, potentially for 3 years. So it's a real relationship. At the end of each year, we look for the fit. Are we working well together? Are we meeting their needs? And if so, we'll renew for a second and then a third year. So that's highly unusual. The money we give is unrestricted, also highly unusual. And what comes with it, besides the money, is the fact that you have these 80 partners who at any given time will have the expertise to offer their skills for free to these nonprofits that we've selected. And again, because it's potentially for 3 years at a time, we have a nonprofit in its first year, another in its second year, another in a third. And so those partners, again, what we're providing with the partner skills is all about capacity building. It's jargon, I know, but strengthening the nonprofits, helping them do what they already do well, even better. So many funders give towards a program. They care about poverty, they care about childhood obesity, whatever it is. We're focusing on the organization itself, thinking that if we make them strong or even stronger, then they can do their work better. So that's sort of the basic model. Yes, we're part of a network, but I noticed you're talking about breaking rules and or maybe not wanting to have rules. I mean, there's a great deal of autonomy in SVP Cleveland. So we have the benefit of a network where we can all share best practices. I can call any executive director up anywhere in the network in a given day and say, have you had this challenge? How have you handled it? Or I'll receive a call like that. So we have the benefit of that. We have the benefit of the network's help with things like branding and website design and so forth. But we have intense autonomy locally. So we get to decide, for instance, in Cleveland, we don't have a single issue area that we focus on. we decided to just open it up across the board. We have an investment cycle, and I know we'll probably get into that in a minute, so I won't go into too many details, but we have an investment cycle that starts the beginning of the year in January and runs through May, so it's intensive. And as a result of that cycle, we will pick a nonprofit, again, to devote our time, our energy, our talent, and so forth to, again, potentially for 3 years. The folks who are drawn to us, I think it's very much, these are people who care deeply about Cleveland. Again, whatever their age, whatever their background, whether they're transplants or whether they were born and bred here. They love Cleveland. They've almost to a person have done something on their own before coming to SVP, and they love the fact that through our organization, they get to work collaboratively, they get to see the difference that they're making, one nonprofit after another. And I think to the issue of startups and the nonprofits that we select to work with, we have chosen, for the most part, not to work with startups. There are organizations in town who do just that. And we feel as though our sweet spot is to work with nonprofits that have a track record. They're established, they've already begun to work on the issues and on their mission, and they're seeking our help with HR issues, IT issues, board development issues, scaling, succession planning, you name it. And so we feel that's where we're most helpful, to come in when they have a track record and we can take them to the next level. And I think the other matter is, the other part of our mission, besides capacity building, is education. It's educating our partners as philanthropists, as community members and activists. So we have education events all year long. Some are devoted exclusively to our partners, some to our investees. We call them investees, grantees. And then some to the community at large. And that's an essential part of what we do. And what we find is that as we're helping our nonprofits that we've selected, we're all learning. We're learning from each other. We have partners who have come from a for-profit background who suddenly discovered that these nonprofit skills translate and help them be better in their own work, and vice versa. So the learning, and as a former teacher, that's something that inspires me on a daily basis, how much we're all learning from one another, from the people that we're investing in, and from one another. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Wonderful opening. I think that gives us a nice kind of waterfront view of the three, recognizing that there are other models in between and along the spectrum. I don't want to over transactionalize this, but let's just think for a moment about the investor-investee, grantor-grantee, however you think about that relationship. I want to ask you about both sides of that. First, let's talk about being on the funder side. It sounds like maybe the premise of my question is wrong, in that it doesn't sound like it's hard to get people to join these organizations. It sounds like, and in some ways you have to limit maybe the number. There's an ideal size beyond which might be problematic for operations. But what keeps people, just the basic question. I'm a busy person. I support charities. Why would I complicate my life by throwing my money in with other people that maybe don't see things the way I do? And once I get in there, what keeps me staying with the group? And I do want to ask you all about retention and turnover in the groups, but I'm presuming that the retention, what I've seen, the retention is incredibly high in giving circles once people get in. So anybody like to start with that?
Our retention is at about 86% right now, and we do have a lot of folks who end up leaving town or whatever, so we lose them for those reasons too. But what draws them, it's interesting that the premise that you laid out. I think one of the very things that our partners will later champion is the fact that it's not the same old, that it's not the same list of usual suspects of the people that they hang out with. It's the fact that they are getting to work elbow to elbow with folks from entirely different professions, different regions, different ages, different demographics. That is very appealing. And then the idea that they can leverage the money that they contribute, the time that they give, they can do far more together than they could do alone. And then I think also the very personal aspect of this, that they have a say. It's not as though they're writing a check and they wish the organization well that is the recipient of that check, but here they're getting to put a face to the organizations that they're helping. They get to see the actual benefit. They're doing the work. And you say about, you mentioned about the busyness, and it's so true. All of our partners are busy. And the wonderful thing in our case about having 80-some partners is that I can sort of absolve everyone of partner guilt. I can say, I understand that you may be all in for the next couple of months, and then you may be traveling for work or taking care of an elder parent or taking children off to college visits, and I may not see you for several months, maybe not even for half a year. So for us, there's flexibility built into our model. So I think it's the personal, it's the impact, it's the fact that they get to work with people that otherwise they might never meet. And the learning that all draw them, keep them. It's those relationships, I think, above all, the relationships with our grantees, investees, and the relationships with one another that keep them with us.
I think that the group that we currently have at Fund First these women share a commitment to helping people who are disadvantaged. I think that this is a very, very strong thread among all of us. And it would be very easy, and I know that there's a lot of us that are writing checks to other organizations. Personally, I don't like writing checks to United Way and Red Cross. I even used to be on the board of Community Shares, if any of you are familiar with that. So I'd like to know where money is going and what people need and what they're doing with it and what are the outcomes.
We can dub that out.
Okay, from doing that, but at any rate, I think that we share this commitment, and there are obviously in any organization there are going to be people that are much more involved in doing the work, and then there are going to be people who, even at this level, write a check and come up to a couple of meetings, or maybe we have 2 social events a year, so maybe come to the social events, but are very, very busy, like you said, where they're very, very busy and they've got a lot going on. They may go to Florida for the winter and they can't be at all the meetings. But I think we have a shared commitment to helping people who are less fortunate than we are. And we also have a shared commitment to women and children's issues. And we start out with a theme, and as we narrow it down, it always comes down to women and children's issues and what we can do to help support them. In terms of retention, I think we have I can't give you an exact number, I think we've got a good retention rate. We'd like to be at 30. We seem to hover around 25, 26. People drop out for personal reasons. Sometimes people just want to perhaps go in their own direction and do their own thing with their charitable giving. There's a lot of women in there that are doing a lot of things. They sit on boards, they've got their own thing going on, and so I think that our retention is very, very good. Our time commitment is not that heavy. We have 6 to 8 meetings a year, and you don't even have to come if you don't want to, but we really do like everybody to come, especially when it comes time to making decisions. What is our theme going to be for the year, and then who are we going to give our money to?
Okay.
Yeah, I would say, the story is somewhat similar in that I think most of the members of the Collectivo feel like we get a lot more out of the experience, frankly, than we give. Ours is, I think, uniquely, we really started as a core, mostly a group of friends, and kind of said, hey, I know this person, I know that person. And so the original group was relatively easy to pull together. And knew each other sort of a little bit, but the process of building the organization made us all get to know each other a lot better, and really some of the people in the Collectivo have become some of my closest social friends, and weren't before we started this process, but doing it together really was such a powerful experience, I think, learning and growing together. And we have over 20 Collectivo babies have been born since we formed of this original kind of group of friends, because we were all sort of at that pre-kids. I was pregnant with my first child at our first meeting, so I always remember that. And so our membership has ebbed and flowed very dramatically as sort of several of those members have come in and out with dealing with having children and changes professionally. But I think what the core group, almost everyone who was there in the beginning is still there, and then we've grown and have some newer members that have started, some that have stayed, some that have come and gone. What I think is unique to other groups I've been involved with is that people will leave for 2 or 3 years and then step right back in, partly because there's a certain social aspect to it, but partly because I think it's just a space with very limited roles. So you can show up and take something on, and what the group does is very dependent on who happens to have the time and energy to make things happen. So for a couple of years we were doing events because one of our members was like someone that liked to throw parties. So we had some parties, and then that member stopped being as involved, and we haven't thrown parties, and we haven't, it's sort of how it goes, and people are okay with that, and people take on roles. For many years I was the person that was checking the email, and someone else was the person who was updating the web page, and it's those get passed around. We don't have a co-chair we don't have any of those formal roles, so that does lead to some instability and balls getting dropped, but I think it also is why people feel the ability to come and go. And the other thing that I think is unique about what we do is anyone can participate in any stage of our process, whether or not they commit funds, apart from the actual grant-making decision. We have one meeting a year that is just for, we do one cycle a year, and we have that one meeting, actually people can participate in that meeting, but the actual voting is just for giving members. But and we have a structure so people can pool their funds to be a member even. So we've had a couple of times, 3 people that are friends that throw in their money together and they share a vote. So we try to make it as accessible as we can. And I think it's really, it's paid off in terms of the feeling of community that has developed.
I think that's a great model because it really encourages young people to get involved. And that's been one of our challenges. We've recently, we just put in a new rule, which you don't have rules, a new rule that says under 40, you can get into the group for $500. Because we're really trying to draw younger people into this whole concept of just giving. However you give, it's just giving and being involved. And the earlier you start, I think the better it is.
And along those lines, we too have made some adjustments over the years. We used to have a slightly more rigid approach to the contributions people gave, and it was based on age. And then post-recession, we've started to make some rather dramatic shifts. And so now our model really is personally significant giving. If everyone's giving at whatever's a stretch for them, and that we've expanded the giving levels. The lower level is 1,000 on up to, well, it's indefinite. But typically people are giving more at $2,500 a year or 5,000 or more, but there are plenty of people who come in, particularly millennials or nonprofit staff people or others who've lost jobs recently or whatever, who may be coming in at a lower level. And it's anonymous. No one knows what anyone else is giving. No one cares. Everyone has exactly the same title, the same values, the same vote. And what's wonderful about it is then, we do have folks, and particularly millennials will say this, they'll come in and they expect to kind of sit on maybe the sidelines for a while to learn, to grow, and then ultimately share their voices, and we're like, that's not going to happen. You're right in there and in the thick of things. We don't have a junior board. We have millennials on our board. And so everyone really is giving and sharing their expertise regardless of their age, their background, and so forth. And that's been a very powerful, and so our demographics are the spread of folks is really appealing and very vibrant as a result.
I'm sold.
I know I'm banned from being in your group, Karen, but maybe my wife can.
Yeah.
All right, so let's flip it around now and think about it from the nonprofit, the community initiative, the neighborhood group, whatever, whoever's potentially a beneficiary here. Just like we have the usual suspects on the nonprofit side, we kind of have the usual suspects on the giving side. We have we have the entities, you know how to apply for the money, we've gotten it before, it's a set procedure. When I've talked to nonprofits about giving circles, they seem kind of like bemused, like we don't really, it's kind of a mystical process and we're not sure how it works and we don't know people there, or, you know, it's, so I guess what do you think should prompt, and I want to go back to what Hillary said about you all focus on nonprofits that are maybe more past startup, have a track record, and are working on capacity issues. But it sounds like both of the others are more open to smaller, even unincorporated efforts that are doing good work. But how do these folks learn about you, and how do you find them or do they find you, and what keeps them in the game with you if they don't really they're used to traditional philanthropy, not you guys? I just want to hear a little bit about that thinking. Well,
we find them. I mean, they may know about us, but for the most part, we find them. So we pick our theme, and then we identify by speaking to several people that are very familiar with whatever that issue is, whether it's human trafficking or it is women being released from prison. We start talking at a higher level with people who are really familiar with the topic, and then they give us names of groups, and we contact them. And they may know about us, but as far as I know, we've never been contacted by anybody. And then we do our site visits. And I think it's like walking into somebody's home. You can talk to them on the phone, you can have them come in and present, but when you go into their home, you really start to see what the space looks like, and in most cases, it's not beautiful space because these are small, struggling nonprofits. But what the space is like, what the people are like, even what, the people who greet you are like, and you start to go around, and then we ask them to specifically request money, and we're very clear. It's going to be anywhere from $5,000 to $25,000 or whatever we've got. And what would you do, for example, with $10,000, or come up with a very specific need, and then we will consider funding it. So that's how we work with them. It's not the Cleveland Foundation requests the proposals for us, so that's kind of nice. There is a format for it, but it's not real lengthy. It's not super involved.
So is it it kind of feels like when you get in touch with them, it's like, I have a new friend. I'm special. It's even if I don't get the money, I'm feeling pretty good as a nonprofit because I was considered by a group that maybe I didn't have familiarity with.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing.
We do get that. Yeah.
Yeah, ours is like everything else, sort of folksy. It's mostly word of mouth. Originally, our original idea when we were coming together was like, we all have all these ideas, and you need some money to do ideas, so we should pool money and pay for each other to do these ideas. And then we kind of created this whole pooled fund and realized that none of us really had an idea that we wanted to do. So we were like, all right, let's get some other people with ideas and give this money to them. Really, honestly, like the original model was sort of to self-fund creative ideas, and then in the beginning, it really was reaching out to our networks. Like I said, a lot of us were involved already in different kind of social change work on some level or another, so it was kind of word of mouth. I think early on we used some of the Neighborhood Connections network to reach out to other groups we might not know, and ended up, really our problem was that we were getting inundated, and we had really a tiny amount of money to give away, and we felt like we were getting this glimpse into so many fabulous ideas, and we were so small in what we could do, and so that really was the impetus to shift to a fast pitch model, so that more people could see these ideas, because we were seeing tons of great ideas and only able to fund at a really small level a very small number of them. So then really, since then, it's been kind of a word of mouth. We actually, the first year we did flyers. This was like pre-internet stuff, but now it's all social media. It's how we let people know. And our only formal criteria is that the project has to either be based in or impact the city of Cleveland or the inner ring suburbs. And we're really looking for like a discrete kind of project thing. I mean, for us to give $1,000 of general operating support is lovely, but kind of silly. So we're sort of like, if you have that thing you want to try, here's some money so you can do it with no strings attached. We don't ask for reporting and things like that. So really, the way we have one member, his name is John McGovern, and he very eloquently kind of puts it like, we don't actually really think of ourselves as giving money, like we think of ourselves as giving love. He does it in a way that's less hokey, but because we know that the actual dollars we're able to supply are very little, but we feel like the role we play is kind of a vote of confidence, kind of saying like, we think you're a champion, we think you have a great idea, we want to see you be able to do it, and if we can have a tiny part in moving that, then we're really excited about it. And I think that helps kind of the relationship feel less like approach us as a funder. I mean, it's very uncomfortable when people approach our particular group as a funder because our capacity is so small. So we try to break that down. We do every year, when we get to a small number of people we're considering to fund, we have an interview day. Basically, most of the members of the Collectivo gather in some sort of space, and we invite people to come in for a conversation, and we have about 20 minutes per group. I mean, it's some similar kind of site visit format, but it's very conversational, and kind of tell us your story, tell us what your idea is, what impact it would have on Cleveland, and why you're the person to do it. And we make our decisions by consensus as a group, so it's usually very very conversational, the whole process, and we're excited that a lot of the projects that we gave tiny little funds to early on, we've seen grow into be things that organizations like social venture projects have come to support and are sort of like out there in the world, and we feel like we had a tiny little part in their infancy.
Now, by way of illustration, I found Karen by finding a Cleveland Foundation newsletter that talked about Fund First. I found I knew about Collectivo, but when I went to Collectivo's website, there's no names. There's no contact here, aside from an open kind of email contact. So there was no name to go after. But then I got somebody to name names. So I know somebody who used to be in it, and then I got to Judy. Hillary, you got nowhere to hide. You're the executive director. So what's your experience with this from the nonprofit side?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So again, for us, I mean, we've been around for 15 years, so there's a certain, to some extent, a certain familiarity that has grown over the years, because I think for us, it has been word of mouth, I mean, from the get-go. Now we really benefit because not only do existing investees sort of spread the word to other nonprofits, but at the Foundation Center, actually, a huge shout out for the Foundation Center. They've done great work, and they allow us to do information sessions where we will, usually in November, prior to our investment cycle starting in January, they'll give us a chance to come in, they'll film it, capture it, and allow us to answer questions of potential applicants. The other thing that we have found is that there are many people who apply, and may not make it in a given year, but will be undeterred and try again, and ultimately the fit will be right, because we're looking again for the right fit between what their needs are to get stronger and what our partners' needs are. So it's very much more of an art than a science. And so I think, again, it's a combination of social media, word of mouth, growing reputation, impact and results that then encourage others to give it a shot. We too, I mean, our cycle, we try to be very mindful of the fact that many of these organizations, we don't want them to jump through unnecessary hoops, but it is a rigorous investment cycle. There's a letter of interest initially in early January. We had about 25 applicants this year. Again, all issue areas are fair game. And of those 25, then we have a team, the I team, the investment team of partners who volunteer to be on it in a given year. Usually they love the experience so much that they do it year after year. And that team, it's partner driven, so that team will review those letters of interest, did so, and narrowed, and I don't envy them this role, they had to narrow the 25, 26 applicants down to 6. So 6 semifinalists. Those semifinalists are, as we speak, finishing up their next sort of proposal to us, which is a little more extensive, more information about their financials, about their board. And then we will, as with the rest of you, we will look into them more thoroughly. We also engage in site visits, meet their board, really get to know them. And as you say, site visits are a blast regardless. And then our team will have the challenging job of narrowing those 6 down to 2 finalists. And those 2 finalists go before our entire partnership in May. And it's a great evening where the executive directors of the 2 finalist organizations will come before us, give a pitch of their own, answer some questions, then they leave, and then the investment team will, at that point, they're rabid. I mean, they are fully behind one or the other or both, and they will go sort of toe-to-toe and do their own bit of advocacy for those 2 finalists, answer partners' questions, and then a decision will be made that evening on which of those 2 will be the nonprofit that will go forward, get the $15,000 per year, potentially $45,000 over 3 years. And then the other thing I didn't mention before, one of the other advantages that any nonprofit who benefits, who is an investee of ours, we will have a partner who volunteers to be the lead partner, the main liaison with that organization. And they will spend an enormous amount of time getting to know them, working with the executive director, and essentially, it's pretty rare for an executive director to have sort of a neutral third party who's entirely in their camp, whose sole purpose is for them to succeed, to be their cheerleader, their therapist, whatever it is that they need, and to identify what their needs are, and then come back to me so that I can find the partners who have those skills. So I think that also contributes to the folks who apply to us, that they'll hear the results that other organizations have enjoyed, and spread the word that way.
Social Ventures also offers a time-only engagement as well?
Yeah, so the last couple of years, when we got to that final meeting of the 2 finalists, our partners, made the decision. It was usually terribly difficult, and the organization that was not selected, everyone looked sort of crestfallen, like, oh, we really want to do something for them. So several years ago, we made the decision, well, we've given away the money, but what if we give them everything else? They get the lead partner, they get the benefit of all 80 partners, their skills, they get the benefit of our intensive working together, and that's when the time only was born. So we now have several time only engagements with organizations that are getting the free consulting and the relationships, just not the outright grant.
Okay, well, we've got a little glimpse on the decision-making process, but as somebody in a school of social work, on a faculty, I know that group decision-making cannot be pretty sometimes. And I don't want you to tell stories out of school, but honestly, going back to my idea that, well, I don't have to argue when I write my check. I don't have to get into a big debate about it. But I wonder if you could talk about how that process strengthens the group, strengthens the outcome, to have that dialogue about in the decision making, and if it gets contentious, how that's worked through in these settings.
I'd say in our case, we strive for a consensus model. We have a backup option of a 3/4 vote if we can't get to consensus, and there's only been one time in our 10 years that we've had to use that, and it was this past year because we made the decision for our 10th anniversary to give one $10,000 grant. So there was only one award, so it's more like the kind of decisions you have to make. Usually there's wiggle room. People have things that they like. And so we do sort of an elaborate dots on poster board process to begin the conversation and then get down to business. And there's a lot of discussion. And I would say at the root of how it's successful, it comes back to what I talked about before of the level of trust and community of the people, that the relationships sort of trump I think, a feeling of real ownership over a specific decision. I think some of it is also reminding ourselves as we go that, all right, well, my piece of this money is small, so if I can't control every decision about where it ends up, I'm going to trust my partners here that their instincts are good, and I'm getting something that I care about out of this. So I would say, like, our consensus model is not built on everybody actually agreeing 100% that it looks perfect, but on feeling a sense of comfort around where we land. And I think that was really tested last year when we had to make a one decision choice, and it was very painful. And the takeaway from that was that we will never give only one grant again. Which I think is interesting, that people didn't like it. We didn't like having to tussle or feel disappointed. So I think that really has strengthened our group, and we also have learned that sort of the everybody wins piece of it is essential for people to feel good coming out of it.
We don't, first of all, I think this is my 4th year with Fund First, and they've been around 9. And it's my understanding that we've just recently started splitting gifts. Right, Jan? Because you've been involved. And I'm not sure how contentious it got before, but what I have seen in the last few years is a real willingness among all of us to listen to each other. We are very much outcome oriented. We don't just give money for operating expenses. We want to know, what are you going to use this for? And we talk a lot about, is that really going to be effective? I mean, is this really something that can make a difference? And is it something that is so short-lived because we don't give recurring grants like you do? If this isn't something that can solve a problem in 2016, then and there's no chance that there's going to be any funding in 17 on, we probably aren't going to be interested. We would pull back from that. And that's pretty much an understanding among the group, is that we want to solve an immediate problem for these organizations and help them with this. Last year, we did give all of the money to one organization that had matching funds available if they could get $25,000 for a van for disabled seniors. And we were like, that came about pretty quickly. We were looking at a number of groups that really had some great things that they could do, but then, I mean, I was driving down the street coming here and I saw a broken down van for disabled seniors on the side of the road, and you looked at it, and that's really one of the biggest issues a lot of these groups have. So that was just an easy decision. We came about that. When we were talking about homeless women between the ages of 14 and 25, we split it 5 ways because we just saw so much need among these 5. But I think a lot of our decisions come from the heart, that this is a group that, as strong-willed and educated as they are, we all come back to, what does it feel like in our heart? And of course, we're looking at it intellectually too, but where do we really feel we can make the most impact for this problem that we're looking at? So I haven't seen it. We had, over the years at the Giving Back Gang, I remember one year where we met twice because we couldn't decide. Mm-hmm. But then at the end of the day, we did. It's always a good feeling when you do, too. You can't be attached to this stuff, Mm-hmm. It's like not a good thing.
I think for us, it does not rise to the level of being contentious. Passionate, yes. But I think ultimately the sense is that really all of these nonprofits that are applying, and particularly all of them that are applying, are doing wonderful work. So that's like a given, just from the start. And then to have a group of partners who've already winnowed away at those that have applied and narrowed the selection, so that by the time the partners vote, it really is the sense of a belief in the process, a sense that they're all worthy. So ultimately, whoever is selected, it will be worthwhile. I think I've already mentioned the time only was a wonderful sort of way of dealing with, we don't want to just focus on one or only help one nonprofit. And I think also just the sense that when we look at the fact that partners are drawn to the process and to their, hands-on philanthropy is the perfect title for this session because that's exactly what they get out of it, that they're getting to review the nature of the organization, and then for us, because for the organization that we select for a potential 3-year engagement, what we're looking for is there enough need that will sustain us, to keep us involved for 3 years. So if there's an organization that really needs sort of a couple of ad hoc bits of input, advice, suggestions, but it doesn't really rise to the level of a 3-year engagement, because that's an intense relationship. So often organizations that don't make it to that final spot, it may be for that very reason. But what's wonderful is that, and then as they grow and as they develop, they may come back to us again when the time is better for them and for us. So that fit is really essential in our making the decision we do. It's not, is this organization worthy and is another not? They're all worthy. They're all powerful, remarkable groups, but is the fit right this year?
Well, my concerns were put to rest, largely, I would say. So I want to move on and ask you a question about something that a lot of our grantees or potential grantees are facing when they seek funding generally, and that's about the accountability. And there's the upfront vetting, the due diligence, that stuff, but then once you pass that and you get the money, it's the being accountable for outcomes and not only making a compelling case, but then showing that you did the good work. And I just wonder, what are the expectations that you either set? Karen, you just mentioned, did you buy the van? You've got an immediate focus, but I take it not all, like the human trafficking and the other homeless families, not all of them are that readily measurable. But how do you deal with that with your investees?
I think we've decided this year that we're going to get a little better at this, because we really haven't gone back to a lot of these organizations. I think sometimes people are in touch with people and they know what has happened or what has been done, but we haven't had a formal process for going back to them in a year and asking them, what did you do? Can you show us what you did? Obviously, the van is, but that's not how it usually is.
No.
But we've decided to do it, and I think that I'm not sure that I feel that there's that much interest from the group in that level of accountability. But there are some members that want to have a little bit more of it, so I think we're going to start asking the Cleveland Foundation to go back after a year and say, can you give us a report on what you did?
And is that, there's not that much interest. Do you think it's because there's kind of a faith in, once you've done the site visit, you've met the people, you have confidence that they're going to do good work with the money?
Yeah. I think we trust them. There's a level of trust there that, we believe that they need it and they're going to do what they should be doing with it.
Yeah, I think we're similarly, the scope of our grants are so small that to have a formal level of accountability is silly. And we have had, though, what's interesting is we've had a couple of times people we've given money to that weren't able to do what they did, that unsolicited gave the money back to us. Because they like what we do, and they weren't able to do what they thought they'd do, and they gave it back. And we said, you don't have to give it, and they gave it back, which I thought was lovely. And I think is a reflection of really what we're trying to do around building relationships. We do have once a year sort of a report back kind of dinner or potluck event of some sort, and we invite the people who we've given funding to come back and kind of just tell their story, mostly because we get so excited and we want to know what happened. So there's not a formal written report, but we invite people to just join us for a meal and tell us how things are going. And we did the only other sort of circling back that was interesting and led to this challenging one grant only was for our 10th anniversary. What we actually did was we don't do repeat funding either in general, certainly not for the exact same thing. Sometimes there's like different iterations that we've done, but for our 10th year, we invited everybody who we'd ever given a grant to in the first 9 years to be kind of our grant pool for our 10th year and said, we'll give you, one of you $10,000. It can be the same thing or it can be something totally different. Just come back to us with whatever you would do with $10,000, knowing we'd identified all those people as champions on some level. And that was really fun to revisit some of those relationships. And not everybody came back with a request, but it was really fun to sort of circle back. We've also had a few of, in multiple situations, members of the Colectivo have ended up on boards of the organizations because they've gotten involved, or as gotten involved as volunteers, or, and what also is really what we love is that I think there's at least 4 I can think of off the top of my head, grantees who've become members of the Colectivo that enjoyed the process and thought it was interesting, and so we have several of our members are past grantees, and several of our members were members first and became grantees as well. Our original vision did pan out to a certain degree. But that give and take, I think, is at the root of what we do, and very limited accountability about the actual dollars.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I think in some ways we're maybe most concerned about our own accountability. Are we doing all that we intend to do? Are we helping in the ways that we are hoping to? I think for us, one of our challenges is to what extent, it's like attribution and contribution. Can the success of our investees be attributed to us, or are we just contributing to it? I think more often than not, that's what we have to land on, that we've contributed to. So Open Doors Academy is an example of one of our former investees. For those, they work with after school enrichment, among other things, and they work with Cleveland Public Metropolitan School District students, and their high school graduation rate is 100% of the students who are working with their program over the years. Can we attribute it to us? That we know, not at all. I mean, that's their hard work. Have we contributed to their success, or when we work with them? Yes. But as far as other sort of ways we do measure, when we start our engagement with a nonprofit, and we have our lead partner sit down with them, there is a tool that has been developed. It was developed by McKinsey & Company and then tweaked for SVP. And it's called the OCAT, the Organizational Capacity Assessment Tool. But essentially what it's doing is just allows the executive director, the board, and staff to anonymously take this assessment of where they are, what their perception is of their strengths, of their challenges. And it's a great starting point for us to work with the executive director then and sort of identify either it confirms what they already know, or there may be a few surprises and areas in which we can really help and provide some suggestions. Based on that tool, we do create kind of a work plan. And again, it's not heavy-handed, it's not, and again, it's not us coming in an autocratic way saying we have all the answers and you're doing it all wrong. It's nothing like that. It's collaborative. It's saying we're here, we're your biggest booster, but here are some interesting developments. What are the most critical steps that we would like to work together on this year? And because we have a 3-year engagement potentially, we build up that momentum that first year, and then it carries over to the second, and then over to the third, which is really wonderful. But we do then measure ourselves and sort of help keep the organization sort of track their own progress. Mind you, it's not rigid. So if halfway through the year something comes up that was not on that original work plan, not a problem. We change drastically and shift gears as needed. And the only other thing I would mention is we do ask for a lot of anecdotal feedback from the organizations that we help. And I'd mentioned before we were part of an international network, and the network office every other year puts together a survey for all investees across the network that allows them to kind of evaluate the process, us, and just how it's going. So we do have that data as well.
Well, thank you. In a season where we're used to hearing about presidential candidates suspending their campaign, I'm going to suspend my remaining questions and see what questions we have from the audience. Anything goes, comments or questions? Tracy?
Yes, we actually already have a question from one of our live stream viewers. She is Lily Roberts. She's one of our online MSSA students watching right now from Washington, D.C. And Lily asks, many of the funders are describing funding discrete needs that can be solved. As a Mandel School student who works in evaluation, I'm aware of the pressure in philanthropy to focus on quantifiable outcomes. However, I'm struck by the suspicion that philanthropy focused on chronic issues are also desperately needed by the Cleveland community. For example, providing repeated treatment for a chronic illness. How do the panelists square this huge focus on concrete outcomes when there may be community needs that can't be solved by a discrete project?
Sure. It's a fabulous question, and I actually professionally work in informal philanthropy and absolutely believe that that question is right on track in terms of what should happen with formal institutional philanthropy. With the kind of giving that we give, specifically at the Cleveland Collectivo, the scope of support we can provide couldn't even crack the surface of a systemic problem. And we really grappled with this a lot, thinking, we're saying we're going to change Cleveland, we're going to do this and do that. And at some point, I think, came to terms with the fact that with the investment we were able to make in this model, that to try to take on a real systemic chronic problem would be disingenuous, or to, what you're saying about not being able to claim the success of one organization, that the drop in the bucket we could do wouldn't be meaningful. And so I think we don't pretend that we're solving Cleveland's great problems with what we're doing. But I would argue what even working in a very concrete, discrete way, what we, I think, are doing is contributing to building a sense of community and of investing in each other and of collective support. And I think that is, on a small level, building towards a culture of people that are working together for solutions and investing together and making decisions together. And I actually personally believe that that's going to be a big part of how some of these chronic issues can be tackled.
I think you said that beautifully, Judy. And the other issue is that some of the problems in the community, all of our communities across the country, are so huge that what really needs to happen there is that there has to be changes in basic policy. And we're not the instrument for making those kind of policy changes. We just have a little bit of money, and we want to help people who have issues that can be defined, that we feel that we can help with this little bit of money, and then we go on to the next one, because every year we talk about something comes up, whether it's chronic diabetes or it is moms at risk, moms who have no prenatal help, poor moms in poverty, and we talk about it and we say those are big issues that require infrastructure changes, and we really aren't here to change the infrastructure. We're just here to kind of help.
And I think, just to echo what you've already heard, again, our focus is on strengthening the organizations that are doing the work in the community, and with the ripples of their effectiveness. I mean, that you have to begin somewhere. And I think through our involvement, our own partners, back to the learning aspect, our partners become more aware of the issues that those organizations are grappling with. One of our investees deals with recidivism and works with formerly incarcerated folks who return to society, giving them really wonderful skills, in this case in a French restaurant in Shaker Square, for those who know Edwin's, and giving them 6 months of training in high culinary skills so that they have marketable skills at the end of that stint. We work with another organization that deals with urban food deserts, and the list goes on. So I think our partners learn and grow and, again, contribute to those ripples, but they are very much aware that there's much work to be done and that we are not single-handedly going to be able to accomplish that ourselves, but we play an important role, as do others in the community.
I'll add one more really quick. Sure. One other thought, if you don't mind, is that I think another role that organizations like ours can play is potentially influencing the culture of philanthropy that does have the capacity to make systemic change. I think seeing the the sense of ownership of the groups, of the work that they want to do, the trust that you can have, the lack of focus on, meet my vision of what's right for our city, I think, I would hope could be, influential in a way on some of the larger players that could make investments that actually could create some policy shifts. That's my hope of another way that we can, with our small part, hopefully influence the bigger issues.
Well, and I'm always impressed that, even a $5,000 gift, for example, can be a difference maker for an organization where the other money they have is tied up in a way or so heavily constrained by some other funder that this money allows them to do something that can, take it up a notch on something that's already there but not maybe where it needs to be. So the amount of money is important, but it's also what it's directed to that can be the, where the power lies. But you're right. I mean, the systemic forces, that, just like we have nonprofits that as voluntary associations step forward and they name their mission, here's what we're about. These groups have named their mission and they know what their strengths are, sounds like to me.
I have a question. Oh, thank you. In the beginning, you stated that you work a lot with 501c3s. Have any of you worked with and are willing to work with a 501c19?
I have to say I don't know the difference.
Clarify I can't remember what the C19 is.
I am involved with 19 is military. I am
like an association, military benefit?
I am the president of the American Legion Auxiliary of Cleveland.
Oh, okay. Oh.
And we have been around since 1919. We're fledgling. We are chartered in city of Cleveland since 1942. And I just recently took over as president, whereas I've amassed 30 bikes from Case Western, and I and a friend of mine are trying to refurbish those to give those to the children in the community, as well as reaching out to Applebee's to get 15% to give to personal items to pregnant females of veteran families. And I don't work directly with, I work directly with veterans, but I'm also community children. And our efforts this year are homeless, whether it be military or likewise. So I was wondering, do you work with associations like this? And if I were to come to you, would you possibly give us assistance with grant writing, since the few of us on our board don't have that? Thank you.
I would
Any
say
experiences with that?
From Fund First, if that was our theme, your organization would be considered. I think that, I'm going to put this on Cleveland Social Venture, in terms of assistance with grant writing and things like that, we don't have that expertise personally. But it seemed, I don't know if you do personally, but I mean, that sounds like something you might do.
Well, certainly, I mean, with any organization that we select, if that's an area that they need help with, then we definitely would look to see if we have partners, and we do, who have that expertise to provide that guidance and that support. I'm actually genuinely interested in learning more about what you described, because we have not worked. Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I can say for the one bonus, as I mentioned before, of partnering with international partners in mission is we actually have no rule about the tax designation status of potential grantees. We don't, originally we sort of talked, we wanted to have a component of volunteering with the project, and it didn't take off as much on a formal way, although a lot of us have done it individually with different projects. But I would say that, you know, what we do too is try to refer people to other resources in town. You know, like the Foundation Center downtown has a huge amount of resources for people that want to increase their capacity around grant writing. Most of it's free of charge. We more try to connect people with other people who can do it as much as possible.
Thank you.
Judy, you use the term of influence, the culture of philanthropy, which all of you have reflected, obviously. And that's really one of the principles of conversations in philanthropy, beginning with students who are in the training, who will be out in the world of nonprofit, to the people who are graduates from here and other schools or just have gone into the field of nonprofit. How would you suggest to MSAS, Rob, et cetera, getting this influence of philanthropy concept on the move as dramatically, quickly, all the things you've said about granting, applying it to that principle?
Yeah, I mean, I think institutional philanthropy is a very big ship to turn, and a lot of there's a few levels. I mean, part of it is looking at really the conditions of why we need philanthropy, and figuring out how to get a focus on the conditions that create a need for philanthropy versus funding good work. I think there's funding things that change the social conditions and funding good work. And that's not to say that there's not a huge amount of value in funding good work, but that perpetuates the need for philanthropy, of course. And I think there are some real leaders in philanthropy right now that are starting to, I mean, have been for many years, I don't pretend to be ahead of the curve on this, that have been in conversation of how do you do real systems change funding. And I think that's the tip of the iceberg is making connections with some of those funders that are really working to create change. I think locally there's some real leaders that are being experimental in how they're doing their funding, that are being collaborative. So many funders, we spend so much time telling people to collaborate, and funders are notoriously bad at collaborating with each other. So funders that are willing to do that, and I think a lot of it though it comes down to is breaking down kind of the dance that everybody does of telling funders what funders want to hear, and funders maintaining a need to be super accountable for things that are really unrealistic. And so I think a lot of it comes down to the same principles of trust and communication. It's hard to do, and I think there are some funders, though, that are really thinking about it, and the more that those funders can get it to a hold and demonstrate, hey, we can make real impact in communities doing funding differently, then some of the other funders will start to move in that direction as well. So I think that's the place to start. I don't know that, I mean, I'm just sort of speaking about my personal opinion. The place of something like the Cleveland Collectivo in that process, I think, is just building relationships, demonstrating the value of having authentic connections to the people you're in a philanthropic relationship with, limiting unnecessary levels of accountability and unnecessary, I mean, like you said, of trying not to create extra hoops to jump through. I think I think for organizations like ours that are small, it's more maybe just modeling kind of a pilot of how you can do it. I think the real work, though, is more between the grant seekers and the big foundations in terms of actually creating a culture shift there. Mm-hmm. It's a big project, but I'm hopeful that there's some momentum around it.
One of the advantages of being part of a larger network in SVP is that we have 2 conferences a year to which we're all invited, partners and staff. And I heard this wonderful exchange last fall at a conference where they had a funder, I think it was someone from the Ford Foundation, and a nonprofit, and he's also a blogger. And he was very forthright, and they're sitting and having sort of a face-to-face conversation in front of all of us. Excuse me. And the nonprofit spokesperson said he thought it was so interesting over the years that funders, in his experience, have been trying to make adjustments to try to prevent from giving, imposing onerous, demands on those seeking funds. And one of the things he noticed, the nonprofit spokesperson noticed, was that in an effort to make life easier for the applicants, funders had said, we won't ask you to submit these extensive applications, these proposals, 20-page proposals. But instead, they'd say, we only need a 3 or 4 page proposal, although we also need like 20 supporting documents, but 3 or 4 pages. And he said, if any of you have ever done any writing, we all have, it's so much harder to write 3 or 4 pages or 1 or 2 pages than it is to write more extensively. So he said their intentions were great, but the result was, and particularly for this particular nonprofit who had small budgets, small staff, and he said, for us, then it means every word counts. And that ended up being much more burdensome than the intention, than was based on the original intention. So I thought that was interesting. And I started being very mindful of, to what extent are we contributing with the best of intentions to any of those same. So it made me much more aware of possible repercussions of what we ask of our applicants too.
I think a willingness to be in it for the long haul. I mean, there's some really basic changes that institutional philanthropy could make that I think could really make big changes of multi-year general operating support that I like to think is somewhat starting to trend. I think there's becoming a higher level of self-awareness, but it's, that doesn't make it any easier for the nonprofits that are kind of chasing, this year foundations care about this issue and next year they'll care about that issue, or the perennial question of how is your we actually in the Collectivo we used to sort of ask like, how's this going to keep going after our grant, even though our grant was tiny, and then we realized it was like just the worst question you can possibly ask, because it's it's such a silly thing in that in almost all grant applications they ask you about sustainability, and we all kind of know, well, I'm probably going to have to go find another funder when you stop funding me, and that until we start thinking collaboratively about sustainability and being realistic about expectations, and it's not going to change.
The sustainability question is an invitation to be lied to. It's like, tell me you're not going to come back to me for money in the future. Exactly. That's kind of what they want to frame that as. That was a really, Gail, you called us out on changing the culture of philanthropy, and Gail was really the heart behind this series, and what I'm taking away from this session is partly that we want to have these different tiers or opportunities for all of us to engage in philanthropy. There's always going to be the institutional, but it seems like the Giving Circle is here to stay as one way of becoming engaged, and certainly in the social media, crowdfunding, Kiva, other things where I can put my money in with others and allot it to different causes, but I'm not engaged in a personal way. Well, I get into this debate all the time with my students. Is electronic interaction equivalent to in-person interaction? And I guess I'm showing my age that I feel like it isn't. But certainly the level of engagement can be as fulfilling for certain individuals in any of those mechanisms. And so I guess any predictions about Giving Circles? Is this Giving Circles will come and go, they'll, just like nonprofits, they'll be born, they'll have a life course, and they'll maybe die, but they'll be replaced by others? What do you predict for the Giving Circle world?
Well, I think because our model is a little bit, it's a Giving Circle, but a bit more than that. I'm obviously biased in the sense that I think that SVP as a model, as an approach, has staying power. I mean that because people are playing to their own strengths, using their own skills in addition to their money, in addition to the time. And I think also when we see the description of millennials now as being purpose-driven, and it's not millennials alone, I mean there are plenty of other generations that are also driven by purpose, but there is this sense of wanting to do, or wanting to have a kind of a lasting and a very personal impact. So I guess I don't see it as dying anytime soon, and the need is so great for our involvement. But again, I think at least within SVP, we have partners who've been with us for the full 15 years. We have folks who are bringing in, neighbors and children and colleagues and so forth. So anyway, I think suffice it to say that I do think that there is this sense of longevity to it, and also because it's so partner-driven. It isn't someone else telling these people partners what to do. They are the force that's making the decisions and acting upon what drives their heart and their spirit.
Yeah, I really think that the collective giving as a model is democratizing philanthropy. It's elevating the voices of the people that don't usually get to make decisions around money. And in our case, it's, I would say everyone in our group is college educated, have enough means to give away $400 a year. But I think, it's not that we're necessarily an unheard demographic ourselves, but I think the concept of collective giving is really potentially the future of changing power dynamics in our communities. That if this concept can translate, you look at the way candidates raise money for office. If we can look at it as like this is an opportunity for people to have a voice in what matters in their community, to give people opportunities to test things out that don't fit the paradigm of what the people with the most money and influence have right now. I think this is the way to do it. I think it's really exciting. I think individual giving circles will probably come and go, and they all have their different personalities and meet the different needs of people that are drawn to them. But I think the concept of collective giving for me is a really exciting opportunity to actually change the way resources are handled in our communities and create independence from the big philanthropy.
I think our challenge is to bring younger people in. When you take the small groups like Fund First, is to bring in the younger women and to have them bring their friends in and continue to do this, because we are going to get older and we are going to start to fade out. And I know one organization that, the group is getting quite elderly. I mean, people are in their 80s. And if you don't bring in those younger people, and the other thing is, I feel it's almost like our responsibility to educate these younger people on the importance of doing this. It's just, there's so many drags on everybody's money, and we all know that. And there's so many things that you can do with $1,000, but you have to really start to create a culture where you start to see the importance of it. And the only way you do that is by having conversations like this and to keep it going. I mean, I know over the years I've done things like gone to Moxie's in the morning with 100 women and a bucket on the table, and somebody would come in and talk to us at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'd all just start writing checks and throw it into the bucket. I mean, I think that group might even still exist. And there's all those things because it's a sense of community and camaraderie among us, because we really like doing it. It's a way to be with people who are like-minded because we care. And then you just try to build on it. I also think donor-advised funds from a family level. I'm a financial advisor. I strongly encourage my clients to do family donor-advised funds to get their grandchildren involved. Start putting that money in there. Every Christmas, sit down with these kids and say, okay, we got $10,000 that we gave. What are you going to do with it? I don't care if it's baseball or golf or American Girl dolls, but let's talk about what do you want to do with this, just to start that mindset going.
All right, I think we've reached the appointed hour. Can you join me in thanking our panel?